What is going on, everybody, and welcome to the channel. Let me apologize now for the air conditioner. See, in today's video, I wanted to talk about a few more bad faith arguments, if you will, that you'll hear many people use, and that's going to be, black on black crime or violence, and that white people were slaves, much longer or much more than black people were. Now, first, I want to touch up on the white slaves aspect of it. There's been plenty of white slaves going all the way back through history. The problem is many of those don't impact our country. They didn't happen here. Like, do you see the difference? We're talking about what happened in this country. And yes, there were Irish servants, right? See, there's a difference between chattel slavery and indentured servitude, right? See, the difference is the Irish who came here as slaves, many voluntarily, weren't actual slaves. They had legal rights, to the point where many could go file grievances against their masters and be released early under mistreatment and misconduct. Could a slave do that? No, because the difference is the African slave was considered property. To the point where if that slave had a child, that child would now be the owner's property. There was no term limit and you were free. There was no filing a grievance and being free. There was no willingness to sign up to be a slave. There was no choice on their part. And yes, even the ones who were forced into servitude, many of which were through punishment, typically through courts, or lords, or what have you. There isn't a comparison. There is really no parallel between the Irish and the Africans in that sense. There really isn't. And as far as the Atlantic slave trade, right? That's another thing everybody's, well, the Atlantic slave, Africans sold Africans to Africans and to everybody else. And yes, again, what's that have to do with what our country did? Not to mention, yes. African tribes would enslave other prisoners of war, if you will, right? So that was something that would come naturally in the act of war, and contrary to popular bias, it's not like Africa was a war-ravaged wasteland, like something you'd see out of a comic book before white man showed up. They weren't just killing everybody all the time and enslaving them. No, that happened after the white man came up. Because again, before, it was only done as a prisoner of war in the slim chance that a war would break out. Well, after the white man arrived, European man arrived, well, now tribes intentionally started war to enslave for the profits the white man was given. I guess you could say that was Africa's first taste of capitalism. And to the point where, if you look at Africa right now, they're still reeling from it. They're still reeling from it. Because to the reverse of what happened in China, if you will, for context or reference, is I'm talking about the one-child law that China had for a while, and the impacts that had on the proportion of male and female, where it was like twice as many male as female. Well, Africa was the reverse in the sense that there was like 2 or 3 times as many females as there was men. And this is something that took generations and generations and generations to make back up. Not to mention, again, because of this, after slavery was ended, that country collapsed because its entire economy was now solely based off of slavery. Nobody is condoning or absolving any of their own influence, if you will. But what they did does not erase anything that happened in this country. Like, how is that? Like, I even seen somebody said, well, Spartacus and the Roman Empire. Like, really? Like, really? I mean, if anything, like, wouldn't that have been, like, Rome, Italy? Yeah, I know a lot of Americans call that white, but, there's a good portion of the Italian population that's not white. And to be honest, very many that I've met in my lifetime that don't like being called white. Plus, if you look at the time, the area, I mean, there really wasn't very many white people in that area. Sure, they're not as dark as Africans or again, they're still not white. But even still, that's like, you're talking about Rome like 30,000 years ago. And trying to correlate that to our country over the last 400 years. What does that have to do with it? Like, literally nothing. Like, who do you hear saying, yes, that, oh yeah, the Romans, man, it's too bad Spartacus came up and freed all those oppressed slaves, because damn, we sure wish we still had them. Or, hey, can we please not talk about that? That's in the past. That's history. Actually, speaking of which, ding. How is it somebody who's talking about history in the sense that we need to forget about history is using history as the example to get over history? Sorry, that just came to me. Oh my God! Look, nobody is saying yes. Africans selling Africans to other Africans and to white men. That was great, guys. That was perfectly fine. You know what made it wrong is, why did white people have to get involved? Or, damn it, man. You know what? It's really a shame that some white people were enslaved, but not to the same capacity. But you know what? We should ignore the impact that slavery had on Africans in comparison, because it happened to white people in the smallest of capacities. It's the same thing. Like, nobody's saying that police brutality doesn't affect white people. Nobody says that. Not at all. And to all these people who sit here and be like, well, why it's all lives matters. Why is it just black lives? No, see, the only people making it about black lives is you and the like. Yes, it says Black Lives Matters, but it doesn't mean only Black Lives Matters. And I've mentioned this in other videos, but to the point where there are plenty of incidents that's happened to white people that I do not hear about from white people. Do you know who I hear it from? Black Lives Matters groups. Yes, and there's white people in those groups, but like, why do you think that is if they only care about black people? And the whole black on black crime, right? This in itself is just to spin a narrative that black people are just inherently bad, inherently black. I mean, that would be true, wouldn't it? I mean, they are black. They're born black. Probably a pretty bad joke, but to try to paint the African American community as inherently bad or inherently violent, when they'll ignore that if you took, color out of it in that sense, and you went, well, how about white people? Well, yeah, if you're white, you have a much, 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 much higher chance of being attacked or having a crime committed against you by another white person than you do any other race. So the fact that black people commit more crimes or more violence towards other black people, like, what's that really show other than crime isn't relegated to race? Especially when you consider that, well, look at it. Many of you people who might be watching this, you look at your town. Look at, just because you have a couple sprinkles, a couple jimmies, if you will, sprinkled throughout the town, right? That's not diverse. That's still like all white. Because if we were doing it on like one of those pegboards of colors, it'd be all white, and then the last like 4 dots would be colored. So obviously the majority of the crimes in that area are going to be committed by white people. Holy shit. So again, it stands to reason then that the majority of crime committed in areas predominantly of people of color is going to be committed by, holy shit. Wait, so black people aren't going to white people's communities and committing crime? And they are. Then again, some also live there. And white people aren't going to the city and committing crimes. Or certain neighborhoods. Oh my god. And again, I've touched up on this in other videos as well. This in itself ignores the Irish and going back to the Italians. Since you want to consider them white, right? Do you remember the ghettos? Think about the 30s. Think about the 30s, right? 30s and 40s, give or take. That was a real great era for that mob mentality, right? Yeah? The mafia was in like full bloom, FBI informants and all that good stuff. Yeah? Those areas were all fucking white. How violent would you think those areas were? Do you think they were less violent than the areas that were still segregated at that time? Actually, those same areas are still actually segregated. Google it. Well, no, there was actually more crime per capita in the white areas during the mob era, if you want to call it that. Essentially, it was proportionate to the population. You know what that says, right? Violence and crime is not derived from one's race or genes. It is an uncontrollable, unavoidable effect of poverty and sustained poverty. The longer you're poor, the more chances you're going to have to do something stupid. And then, actually, one more point. You hear a lot of people, I see a lot of videos lately going around, TikToks, and like, I regret getting into TikTok because holy cringe. But you see a lot of these videos, like, you see this behind me? You see this behind me? You see this? You see that flag? I worked hard for this. My privilege doesn't exist. But you're showing it. Subconsciously, implicitly, you are actually showing it. Hard work don't work for everybody. It works for a very small amount of people, and there's a lot of infrastructure delay, if you will, with the way things are in our country. To a point, how many jobs would you assume are in the inner city? Right, quite a few, right? Considering the size of it. Would you say that there are enough jobs to support the people in those areas? No. Why do you think most people commute to work? So you're going to put the ability to find a job on hard work. But you're like, you just keep trying, keep filling out. Again, because that's, like, people don't do that. To the point where, why do you think these labor-ready places are jam-packed full of people? And the same, those are an even easier example, if you will, a better example. First come, first serve. If you don't show up in time, you don't get a job. Well, what happens if, say, the bus runs a little bit late because you rely on public transportation? It's not, well, leave a little early because you're left at the exact same time you do every day, but for some reason there was an old lady pulled over in front of the bus and the bus had to wait. Just little things. Yes, I'm not absolving people who are actually lazy, because that's not relegated to just black people either. Trust me, I've met people of all races who are lazy, and to be honest, in my experiences, well, that's mostly white people. And yes, in my experiences, most of the white people I've ever worked with have been lazy as fuck. But I'm sure you'll argue that they must be the better worker if they still have their job and I don't, right? As if being a yes man is any sign of a work ethic, a good work ethic, or hard work. Meaning, because I choose not to do other people's jobs, well, I'm the one reprimanded. Because they've worked with them for a little while now. They've kind of gotten this relationship going. They're little buddies, right? Where people, they care too much about wanting to be people's friends. And essentially, for example, instead of, say, getting rid of 3 people they know are lazy and that I'm pointing out are lazy, again, even though they know are lazy, instead of getting rid of those 3, well, they'll just get rid of me, because then they don't have to make up any hours. My hours will be easily split between everybody else left. Whereas trying to replace 3 people's hours, there's a lot of similar reasons along those lines, which I've gone over in other videos. Like, what about all the people who have to deal with this stuff? Look, I'm not looking for a handout. I'm just trying not to get fucked. For once. I just want to go to my job, do my goddamn job, and go home. I don't want to have to go do your job. I'm not getting paid to do your job. I'm getting paid to do my job. If you're there too getting paid, well, you're there getting paid to do a job. Plain and simple. And because of my work ethic, and because I don't like to stand around, I always try to find shit to do. But I have to find shit to do. I can't just sit around. Again, it's a different story when I'm at home. To the point where I will do other people's job, and I don't have an issue helping people. See, the problem is everybody takes advantage of it because they start realizing, well, they don't have to do it. Because if they don't do it, I'll get to it. To the point where you'll see them sitting there on their phone with nothing done on their station. Or hanging out in the corner talking to the manager and somebody else for an hour and a half, 2 hours, with nothing done on their station. So I say something. Well, they reduce my hours. I can't afford to lose my hours. I have to work 6 nights a week for a normal paycheck. Yes, this is my fault. I take full responsibility for that. Does it justify being treated like this? So, you're saying that because of something that happened to me as a juvenile should dictate my life, the rest of my life, no matter how hard I work, because that one mistake, man. And again, in certain circumstances, I get how that works, right? I knew somebody who was young, right? He was high school, and went to a gas station. Didn't know why his friend wanted to stop there. Well, his friend shot the gas station up and killed the clerk. This happened in Spencer, Massachusetts. A little before 2000-ish. Well, he got hit with accessory. Now, while I understand the crime and its intent, is it just? Is it fair that his life was just ruined because he didn't know a friend of his was that hard up at that time that he was going to kill somebody? And life isn't fair. Well, what happened to hard work? Like, you can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. You can't, oh yeah, life's not fair, but you have to work hard. I have another point. This person I actually know personally. He was a Brazilian man I worked with at an Italian restaurant. Great cook, great worker, and to the point where he works 6 days a week. And he was here on his visa, right? Still trying to get his green card after 50 years. You know, doing it the right way. 50 years later, he could hold a conversation perfectly fine in English. But because of the visa he had, he could not leave the country more than once a year, and for no longer than 2 weeks. So for 50 years, this man only sees his family once a year for 2 weeks. And in doing so, he's very poor here because he sends most of his check to his family in Brazil. But his family is pretty well off in Brazil because of it. Let me guess, life's not fair? You just gotta work it hard and take it, like, just take it up, like, take it in the chin, suck it up? No. If life was only about hard work, that man would have been with his family decades ago, while still being able to provide for them. Shit, if it worked the right way, as everybody wants to scream at, he would have had his green card decades ago. Like, I don't understand, like, because I hear a lot of other people when they're talking, trying to counter these. It's always, well, if you had common sense, if you were educated, and it just makes me, like, drop my jaw, and it just, dumbfounds me every time I hear somebody say that, because it's like, if you had any common sense or education or intelligence, there's no way in hell you'd be able to say any of the shit you're saying. Because being educated in a subject means you know everything about said subject, not the points in which you only believe. That's not educated. That's not intelligent. Sure, can you say it's knowledgeable? Yeah, but how knowledgeable when it's only about this much of the whole picture? I don't know. I'm just getting sick and tired of these bad faith arguments. Look, I'm more than happy to talk to you about the truth in any of this. Racism, in multi-racial racism, in slavery, or any form of enslavement. Police brutality towards white people. I'm all for talking about all of that. I've actually brought this up quite a bit over the last 4 years, more so. I've talked about this with quite a few people, growing up that I've worked with, because of the experiences I had, right? Like, hearing people talk about white privilege, myself, honestly, it gives me a little bit of cringe, because I've never, it was hard for me to understand. Because, again, if you look at my life, it's like, where the hell's my white privilege? But if you watch some of my other videos, you'll hear stories where it was like, holy shit, maybe it was there. Now, yeah, granted, many poor to lower middle class, even some of your upper middle class white people, aren't going to truly understand what white privilege is, because those are going to be the people who actually did work their fucking asses off. But they've been so diluted to think that somebody's trying to take that away from them, and that people are just trying to give other people handouts. No. Like, you're completely ignoring the people who are working themselves to death, just like you are, who aren't getting anywhere because of a system designed to keep them from going places. It's really that simple. Alright, well, before I start rambling off about other stuff, I'm going to try to keep the video between the three things I just brought up. And remember, like, I am speaking purely off of my lived experiences, as well as the perspectives I've gathered throughout my life, because I don't seclude myself to one ideology or one perspective over another. Yes, I agree with some over others, but I won't ignore another perspective just because, right? I will hear it. I will listen to it. I will take it in. And then again, I will take it for what it is. I will do my research. If they're talking about race, I will research race. If they're talking about politics, I'll research politics. If they're talking about sports, I'll research sports. And not that I don't know any of the above, but to help to better my understanding of those. And I think that this is the most logical approach. Because it's to the point, right? If you had enough people say the sky is white, and say it enough and eventually there are going to be people who genuinely believe the sky is really white. No matter how many people sit there and be like, look, it's right there. What the hell are you talking about? It's blue. They'll be like, no, that's a reflection, that's this. They will find ways to justify and defend their stance, no matter how asinine it is, no matter how factual in your face that it is. And I mean, honestly, both sides are guilty of it. Because, look at it. Both sides will ignore their own sides to call out the other side. Alright, I'm rambling. So, with that said, I'll catch y'all in the next video. Hey, y'all be safe. Later.